when it comes to all of us individuals having our birth and death process. Remember, one of the hardest things to do is to wake up a personality consciousness, or to be aware of accepting your fate. And that's a very challenging thing to do. Hardest people to wake up, mental projectors, because they have very strongly defined minds, so they're very clearly identified with their minds. But it's not to say that there is good, bad, or right, or wrong, or better than. It just is what it is. We all have birth and death. And in the end, all things end. We have the end of this Maya, this wheel that you would think never stops turning, and yet it does. The end of this Maya game. So as an example, you're alive. I'm alive. We're here. We're alive. Congratulations. We won the lottery, right? But when the body dies, well, that's the end of our Maya, as in this Maya construct is built around the body. The body is built through the aura. The aura builds the body. Okay, so we're alive. We have a Maya because we have a body to interface with the Maya. And when we die, we have this process of decarnation, where we go through our Bardo stages. And then when it comes to this stripping away of the consciousness, as in Maya dying because the end of self-reflected consciousness. Okay, Ashna, right? Our Ashna is about self-reflected consciousness. So when you strip away the form mechanism of consciousness, you strip away the Maya itself and all the rules of Maya. If the planet is hit by an asteroid and everyone dies, there is no more Maya, as in all of our forms have disintegrated. So the matrix of what it is beyond our plane according to Ra, and the way in which is it impacted by the larger environment, meaning our solar system, our universe, so on. It changes all the rules as far as a totally new construct will emerge. So it's the end of these forms. 1,300 years, that's it. The end from a geological point of view. So you can see evidence of that all around us. Just look up at our moon and its pock-faced, scarred surface. You know, there's been devastating impacts even on our planet as far as mass extinctions, where up to 95% of all life has been literally overnight completely devastated by things, you know, an asteroid banging into us. That's the end of the nature of all of our things. If the Earth is covered by this giant cloud where nothing is getting through as far as sunlight is concerned, we would very quickly die. It's one of the most fascinating things when we look at the simple. Well, what is needed for life? What's necessary for life? Water and sunlight. Those two things. Get rid of the water, good luck life, you know? So everything in life, we are all form creatures, is about movement. We're all spiraling through space and time. We're all falling really around our sun, but spiraling. And everything happens in accordance with friction. Friction make babies. You know, we collide into each other to make babies. And how things are created are also how they're destroyed. As in the context of this larger movie, you know, 1,300 years. Asteroid even just demolishing our Earth. That's how he was told that the end would be experienced. So the cataclysm coming. There's no bunker that's going to prepare you for the end. It just won't happen. So in looking at the nature of our personal or individual death, death being personal to the body, and the knowledge of the stages of dying as we have done, according to Ra, the interest for us as human beings is, of course, what's interesting, you know? We want certainty. What's going to happen? Tell us, Ra, you know? And, of course, does it really matter? Here and now. Does it matter to you or me that the end of our reality comes in 1,300 years? No, not really. But there are some things that might matter And that's what's so interesting about this whole process of death, dying, and Bardo, is coming to grips with the nature of, first, our reality, second, our mortality, and third, what can we do about it, if anything? You know, if there's no choice, what do we do? Seeing, and just being, you know, accepting that we are witnesses, not the driver, that we are passenger consciousness, and either commiserating or enjoying, you know, the laughter of what it is to be here now and alive. Or maybe it's, you know, consoling each other as far as the challenges that I know each one of us has in our lives. We're all facing something. So, death being one of those bigger somethings, we're going to review a little bit about the death process. Remember when we looked at an individual that we began with the phenomenon of our design crystal, the magnetic monopole, and the personality crystal, and that the monopole is the regulator of mass. Ra says, quote, "I don't think there is a word for how unbelievably incredible the magnetic monopole is. And that the whole, if I can even say it that way, burden of existence is on the shoulders of the monopole." So this is one of the ways that it fulfills its purpose, through being a regulator of mass. It's a very specific language that Ra used from the very beginning, is that it holds us together in the illusion of our separateness. So holding the design and the personality to itself, so that we have a body. If there were no monopole, nothing would hold me to me and you to you. We would just be itness of being. So by holding us together, it brings us to this illusion, our density of the body, the mass. And he tells the story, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, you know, where they weighed bodies after death and they saw just a little bit was gone as soon as somebody died, as far as the weight of a being. So he says that the monopole is what condenses our frequency, our life frequency. We know that this Maya is based on frequency, that in fact everything is frequency, everything's vibrating. So the consciousness frequency that's pulling us together, it's monopolarity, monopole, pulling in one direction into the denseness of what it is to be alive, vital, or not. When they're gone, they're gone. They don't pull us together, you know? So it's not so much that the design crystal leaving the vehicle, the body, kills us. It's actually, the body is filled with all kinds of design crystals, you know, because every single cell of your body has a crystal. But that prime magnetic monopole that leaves the body, that's when you're really dead. Because the monopole is what's holding us together. So, giving us mass, giving us density, giving us weight. What Ra wants to talk about, according to the organizing of the design crystal, is something that's really incredible here. So we know, as an example, remember that the design and the monopole come together at the moment of physical death. And they leave the body and they go into the mantle of the earth. Now, Ra doesn't want us to get stuck as in thinking it's exactly at the middle, the center, the core of the earth. Okay, he was just taking advantage of geological slicing here. But the concept of the original design crystal bundle, unlike our personality crystals that are original, floating around the earth, there are actually many, many, many personality crystal bundles, but we're also dealing with one thing here, which is the design crystal bundle, and it doesn't have to be precisely in the center of the earth. What we consist of, this form, as far as trying to imagine how much there is, I don't think it would be possible. Ross says there isn't enough zeros for us to be able to grasp the numbers, the sheer numbers of design crystals. So he gives us this example. If we think about every living thing having the potential of replacement. So as an example, from the moment you were born, did you know you were dying? Yes, all the cells in your body turning over quite rapidly, you know? So replacement of every cell of every living thing that are endowed with design crystals, because they all are if they're alive, okay? We have these numbers that are almost infinite when you think about the enormous sheer numbers. But that's just the beginning. So if we try to imagine the density of the design crystal bundle, a swarm of billions upon billions upon billions upon billions upon billions upon billions of, let's say, bees. It's hard to imagine what this is, how it's organized. The form consciousness, in essence, of the entire planet is built around the density of design crystals. So deep within the center of the earth, it's very hot there. Personality crystals floating around here are very different, okay, as far as it's out there in the cold of space that our personality crystals are floating. But down in the core of the earth, it's very warm, hot, I would say, you know? So these bundles, crystal bundles, operate in a certain way. They bundle together. There's no gravity. But here, there's density. So relative to the monopoles in the center of the earth, as in most of them, he says 99.99.99% of them, of the form crystals, are actually there in earth, not on surface. So just a massive amount of crystal bundles out here and in here, crystals. So other than the ones like us who happen to be alive on the surface of the planet, and in every cell, every single cell has a design crystal, that's nothing compared to this core of the planet where it's very deep inside and very hot. This sheath on the outside, then there's the general form pool, then there's unmanifested rave crystals, and then at the very heart are the expired rave crystals. So basically, we're looking at 4 different layers of crystals, okay? Form crystals, 4 different layers. Kind of like, if you think of it in the liquid sense, let's say you put water into a cup and then you pour oil on it. You know that they're not going to mix, right? Unless you take a fork and you stir it or whip or whatever. You're not going to get them to mix. So there's layers and layers and layers of design crystals. The liquidity is important in the center of the earth because this allows for things, and the density, it allows for things to move in and out, as in the form crystals, and coming into incarnation on the surface of the earth. So, according to what it is to be in this binary, as a personality consciousness, what we think of as ourselves, there isn't going to be any vehicular ride if there's no form principle, right? If there's no earth, we have no form, and so there's no ride, as in there's no incarnation. So we talk about this because this is time to talk about the end of a round. He called it Buddha's dream to be kind of funny in that he would be a little silly with Buddha, because Buddha would not be interested in form. You know, back in the day, the 7-centered construct, their religions, it was all about transcending form and not embracing our forms. Whereas we know we are personality crystals riding around in vehicles. The form, the body is the life. That's Ra's teaching. He was a messenger of the form, the mother, the earth. So we're looking at, without any form, there is no conscious personality, because There's no ability to distinguish between me versus you because there is no separation, you see. So Ra says, at the cellular level, there are no concerns about personalities. There is simply the cellular forms being created over and over and over again. That is, the models being used over and over again. However, you and me, we are in unique models, as in there's never been one of these vehicles, each one of you, each one of us riding around in. It is unique. So let's look at these different 4 layers. We begin with the outside individually. Let's look at the cellular sheath. So proportionately, if we put it into perspective, it's the very thin crust, you know? It's not necessarily, he said, not particularly accurate graphically, but he wants us to get a sense for it. A cellular sheath represents very different kinds of forms. If we think about the magnitude of the many different ways in which form could be produced or manifest onto the earth, we know then that, yeah, there's a lot of different forms and they are not equal. You know, even human beings, we were not created equal. We are all different, individual. So the tendency, if we think about Earth, we immediately think about humans because we are, you know, or we seem to be, because we are a personality, and that seems to be what's very interesting. And the continuity of our entire process has to do with life. You live, you birth, you live, and then you die, and maybe there's some procreation and some fun and some making money and doing things, but, you know, that's the pattern. But what about all those other things, you know, as far as creatures on this planet? There's so much more than just you and I. So who you think you are has a vehicle. We have to have a body, and these bodies are really special because they're differentiated as far as being unique. There are all these variants, though. All you have to do is look at different cultures to see how different we really can be. 8 feet tall or 4 feet small, whatever it happens to be. Whatever color, your skin or your hair or your eyes, it's very, very different, even just on the surface. So different models of humanity come online at different times in our evolutionary journey or pattern. As far as the development of us Homo sapiens intransitus, we of course can go back to the first upright hominids or the movement of the evolutionary journey if you want to. Now, at the very core of the planet, expired as in, reincarnation, you know, may be part of their potential, but they really are recycled. I've heard him say recycled, as in the same body doesn't ever get born again. You know, we have a very different body. The very density at the center of the earth, the center is the most dense, where the design crystal goes when it dies. It's very important for us to know that they don't get born again. This is a custom-built body. So, predisposition to form differentiation, Ra would say, to use big words. But to put it plainly, everyone's special, utterly unique. And that when you die, the vehicle gets to the center of the earth. A retirement home, you could call it. So what's interesting is that the human design crystal with its magnetic monopole drops down carrying relative mass. Like any time anything dies, not just us as humans, but all the birds and the bees, and that mass is going to get moved to the exact correct place. Not exactly the center, but somewhere in that space. So that there's no longer a chain of movement coming in and out. This internal structure here is out of commission because it's stored in the center. And that liquid environment, he calls it, is so it would be more like a slide or a glide, as in falling through from the less dense into the more dense crystal environment that's around it. So then we find our space, our place. Going back home. Now, the monopole is the driver, so it's the one who's driving. It doesn't, think about it. It just goes, it knows how to navigate home, as in it's completed its function of being incarnate. It returns. But that's not necessarily true for what's happening with the rest of the crystals here. In this second area around the core of the earth, these are the unmanifested, as yet unborn. It's not human. It's not rave necessarily either. He says, according to this body graph vehicle, or the interregnum of the body graph vehicle, the body graph vehicles which have not yet come into form or are not yet born are in the second area outside. So if you study Cosmology 2027 and the Rave body graph, you get to see how the mutated form, according to Ra, is going to be, and the new circuitry. So those, as an example, are going to be where you'll find those crystals that have not yet been born. And when it comes time for somebody to be born or come into form, that's where that area of the design crystal section here, unmanifested rave crystals, will come out to provide a new evolutionary step in the journey for us as humans. So basically what you have, Ra would call it like a car lot. All these nice new vehicles, all the shiny new models. And some of them, most of them actually, have shrouds over them, as in you don't know what they look like yet. The new models waiting to incarnate, they don't have a form yet, so you can't see what they would look like. And the moment that they go through their life process, then they go back down into the center of the earth. Some might be alive for a few minutes, and some might be alive for hours, days, months, years, decades, and so forth. So it's like a flow of energy, okay? So if we can, let's say 40,000 babies die every hour, human babies. So they're coming from here and going out there, and then they're just going back in there. They're coming from here, going out there, going back in here, and so forth and so on. So there's this energetic movement that's happening. So when it comes to us understanding the flow of energy or movement, now we can see a little bit more about how the energetics have us understanding where we come from, near the core, and where we go back to, into the core, as far as our form is concerned. So, an unmanifested crystal starts here, and it could be just coming up, get born, hello, oops, can't breathe, die. We go back into the earth. Their vehicles are used once. They get one precious life, one life experience. But when we get to the larger area here, see how the color is larger as far as the segment is concerned? That's the general form pool. So the general form pool is actually going to be forms that have special functions. And it's a hierarchical way that we live. So our dogs, as far as the body is concerned, our mammals, our cats, they come from over here. And that has to do, according to Ra, with the eventual potential of a personality crystal that has functioned in mammals, the potential for the crystals to also be a part of the crystal bundle field that will survive the end of this plane and move on to the next process. Remember, there's no difference between you and your dog or your cat, your beloved mammal pet, as far as the personality crystal is concerned. It is the design crystal that's different. And now we can see where they come from as far as inside of the earth. So as an example, here we see a shark, the same model for 300 million years, right? 300 million years. That shark model has been viable. As far as it's really interesting to think about the shark living its life, and it dies, and it goes down into the general form pool, and that same design crystal may come back out and be used again. So that's what he means by the no evolution. And it's not just mammals, it's actually the same thing for all the creatures that we know. Their forms are deeply repetitive, as in this concept of evolution or juxtaposition. He sees them as far as evolution of mammals or animals, the form pool, in a very, very specific way in terms of what we call nature. But according to this understanding here, we see again the unmanifested rave crystals, very specific models that are only used once. That's what he's comparing and contrasting it to. As in, there's an evolution in the line of Homo, we who are human creatures, what we seem to be as humans. This line that moved our evolutionary special journey into the potential of having ajna, or self-reflected consciousness. If you recall, we started with 3, as far as centers are concerned, then to 5, then to 7, then to 9. We are in the 9. If we were to have the continuation of this pattern, it would be 11 centered. But because this planet and its death, being on death's doorway, relatively speaking, because 1,300 years is nothing to a planet, we won't get there from here, from this form. As far as these very specific models that only get used once and then new models being brought on. He calls it brought on stream, or being born is another word you could say that. Whereas the general form pool, again, this established model repeated over and over and over again. Generally, the vast majority of nature, an established model that's repeated. And so there's these sequences of elimination of models, we call periods of extinction, like, where we don't have that model anymore. We live in a time frame where certain models are retired, as in, there's no dinosaurs anymore, right? So the instinct forms do not go to the core. They're more likely to begin to crowd around the area of the unmanifested rave crystals and build a kind of density field here. So if we go down to that density field, that's where the dinosaur crystals, the design crystals are, basically. So we find in these designs and the plenitude, the plethora of the hundreds of millions of reptiles on this planet, we still have, other things that are not on this planet still. So the rave crystal is going to be something that has yet to be seen, the full-blown rave. We are transitus, so we still call it the rave body graph. That new model will still use this body graph, but the body graph mechanics itself will be shifting, and that's what you learn in the 2027 materials, the mechanics of rave. What Ra called the voice when it was communicated to him, as far as what the voice was, it was the bundle, as far as what he had talked to him in this mystical experience. He said, quote, "The humility of meeting something that is so extraordinarily deep, I can't express that. But it's so obvious to me that everything is stored down there because that's where all the hardware is. That's the real history." Quote, end quote. So these are the 4 different basic bundles that make up the crystal bundle core. And when the end comes, here's the point. When the end of this planet comes, the whole bundle escapes, this whole thing. So when the end comes for the personality crystals, they don't all go, whereas the design will. The personality crystals will have a culling, as in there will be many that do not survive the cataclysm, according to Ra. So when we look at all of these design crystals, they will move on to the next step of evolution. All of the ones making cells for every single, skin cell or follicle of hair or everything that is inside of your form. Remember, your form is filled with design crystals, not just the main design crystal in your ashna, but every single cell has a crystal. So all of them are going to, quote unquote, escape. All monopoles will act as a gravitational center for the personality crystals. And so this is the whole essence of our form principle. When the design does escape, when the end comes and the shattering takes place, because basically if we're going to collide with something that brings an end to this, you can call it a kind of shattering, where this collection of design crystals and the zillions of monopoles that are there will act as a pull, if you will, the gravitational center for all those personality crystals to wrap around, and away they'll all go on their journey. So every design crystal is going to take that ride. The form principle is what is required for us to continue our process. So the hardware is going to continue. The history of the hardware, all of it is going to escape. But not all of the history of all of our personality crystals of consciousness will get to go. And you might think of that and go, oh, poor personalities. And yeah, it is what it is. Ross says it's what makes it interesting, that the personality crystal only imitates the personality, because it's designed to imitate the personality crystal, because the totality in and of itself doesn't have one yet. Remember, if we talk about, and some of you are new, so you may not know this yet, what Ra considered our binary biverse to be is an unborn child. So a fetus, basically. It hasn't been endowed with its own personality crystal. So we're going to switch away from thinking about the design crystal form and look at this other side of the coin, where we have we who think we are, who think we are because we think. It's actually that this personality crystal is a mimicry. He calls it the oldest lie. The design crystal form is what it is, but the personality crystal is a kind of artificial intelligence. The totality we are learning from this experimenting of being a consciousness, self-reflected consciousness, embodied or seeming to be in this form. So this life process is teaching us what it's like to be witness to the form. The personality crystal being incredibly interesting. We're all very interested in soul, but it's not what it's made out to be. As in, if you could imagine what your personality crystal's real job is, as in your job is to be a conduit, not to identify with it, but to conduit the greater itness. So the infrastructure that makes a personality's job easier is not being the personality. There's this saying that people say, the Tao that can be explained is not the Tao, or paradox is the glue of the universe, is something that my husband likes to say. It's not to diminish how beautiful it is to be incarnate or to be soul or soulful, or to think that you have a soul when we're really just mimicries, because the totality doesn't have a personality quite yet. We're developing that through our process. Ra says it's just a very, very sexy design crystal, all dressed up as a personality. So truly, these personality crystals are not very different. The personality crystal is not, they're the same thing, basically. It's just that in terms of the whole, these personality crystals don't have to all be saved because they're not personality totality at all. When the end comes, there's only a certain number of crystals that are going to continue on in the evolutionary process. So the great culling is the language that he was actually given. A lot of people talk about ascension, and here Ra's talking about destruction or culling, as in, I don't know about demotion, but it does seem to be that way. Every personality crystal that returns to its original crystal bundle will be on this physical plane when the end comes. So, according to Ra, it's one of the more interesting things he was told about the end. He was told by the voice, quote, "The crystals that I carry," so I'm speaking as Ra, he says, "the crystals that I carry will not go beyond this round. They will be annihilated. There will be no place for them on the ship. Those that are going to have a ticket are those that get back to their bundle," unquote. So right there, he was told by the voice that he did not get a chance to get his, going back to his original source crystal bundle. For him, is that Michael? It seems to be, yeah, Michael would be the one. So according to this flow of personality crystals and according to the knowledge, remember that Godhead wheel that we are so familiar with. The flow of personality crystal bundles, the 16 faces of the Godhead. Okay. There is a bunch of personalities going onto the earth, whereas only a few of them are going back to their original source crystal bundle. So how you figure this out is you take your personality sun, I happen to be over here, your conscious personality sun, and you look on that mandala wheel and you find what is the Godhead. And now that's just a label, an archetypal label that Ra gave those areas of the wheel. For me, it happens to be Kali. In order to return to your original source crystal bundle, you would need to have your full Bardo. One of the reasons why we impress it upon each of you to do your best to see about dying correctly, as in no disturbing the body for up to 72 hours, because we don't know when you're going to get picked up. It's not a guarantee as far as what time it's going to happen. It could be less, okay? Not more, but it could be less as far as time is concerned, according to when you get picked up. So that little trickle instead of a flood, if you think about the evolutionary journey, there are 8 billion people on this planet right now. So there's a whole lot coming onto the planet. But as far as dying correctly is concerned, just a few, comparatively. So that trickle turning it into a flood, because it's calibrated into the program how much of a return is necessary. As far as considering the original crystal bundle field, this personality crystal bundle field. Remember, if we were to see it, we wouldn't be able to see the Earth because it would be encased in those personality crystals. There's so many. It's a dense sheath that covers the planet, kind of like a crystal ball. So the neutrino ocean pouring through all of those crystals. We are constantly swimming in a sea of neutrino ocean that is being filtered through the consciousness data field And we who are filters of consciousness in form, receiving that information, that feed, all of us receiving a feed, whether you're aware of it or not. You may be speaking for the voices of the gods without any awareness that it's flowing through you, that it is coming through you. You think it is you, potentially, when you're not aware. It's like being psychic. Everybody is born psychic at some level or to some degree. It's your natural state of being, whether you be clairaudient, clairsentient, claircognizant, feeling, I'm feeling, There was a very distinct moment a couple days ago where I was telling Oren something new that I had learned. And then this immediate thought came in that I could feel was not mine. And it was the thing that he brought up the next moment of when I stopped talking, what he brought up as far as what he said. And I knew it was his thought that I had been feeling before he said it. It just, to have that level of awareness, not thinking that it was mine, but knowing that it was coming from outside, that is one of the levels of sensitivity that you can get to once you decondition and once you experiment and once you feel for the resonance of truth. Is it coming through you? Is it a part of you? In truth, there is no separation, but we live in these bodies that feel as if they are separate. And time and distance and space do not matter. But we are bound by or constrained by this form in order to have our differentiation or our unique perspective of time unfolding. We have to have it piecemeal, as far as our experience of it, unless we get, blasted by whatever psychedelic or mystical cosmic experience that changes our perception of time. Okay, so we have all these people on the planet, channelers. Anybody else channeled? Channeling these people, that group, whatever it happens to be. You're getting a stream, a feed from outside through the crystal bundles into your genetics, your cellular structure, your matrix. We're all tuning forks, as in we're all attuned to these cosmic streams in the neutrino ocean. So we're all being programmed by those crystal bundles. My personality, Kali, fate, the recognition of feelings, the acceptance of what is, this is what you get from me as far as the contagiation. And that's my purpose. And each of you has your own slant or take on your purpose, your own individual truth. So this programming is not something that we're in charge of. We did not choose. The design chose us. It resonated, the design crystal and the monopole. The monopole vibrated and it pulled us down into this form. We're being programmed continuously, all the time. It's not something that we initiate. So the vast majority of the crystals of consciousness that are here now in the crystal bundle field. So mass amounts of these crystals coming through. Most of them, many of them, I would say. I don't know about most. We'll see. I have not done the numbers, but think about 8 billion people. And you remember that graph of how many people are alive now compared to what it used to be. So many less going back to the original crystal bundles. So what Ross says is that many of us on this planet are virgins, as in we have never been here in the soup of things, as in on this earth living in the Maya. But we're being programmed by all of these personalities. They seem to be crystals of consciousness, experiments of consciousness in form. So here we have the main personality bundles, our main personalities. And then we have our random bundle aggregates. This random bundle aggregates is what is a crowded, dysfunctional consciousness field. This is where we have lost souls, as in ghosts and demons and aliens and spirits and whatever you want to call them, goblins, demons, those things that are maybe in these groupings, rogue crystal bundles, 10,000 personality crystals in one of them, in terms of one of these big ones, that's nothing. But the critical mass that you need to have some kind of impact on the human beings and the outside world, in the Maya world, is at least 10,000. When they get to 10,000, that's when they really affect human creatures. Again, remember, if you haven't been through this class, this will be a review for those of you who went through profile, purpose, and function. But it is not that these things are actually evil or bad. It is that the being is attracting one of these things because of their frequency. So a human being resonating on particularly a not self frequency will attract and reflect that not self tendency. So you're going to experience the encounter with one of these bundles of 10,000 particularly. That's the tipping point. That's the number in order to affect the Maya. In order for that being to interpret, they're going to interpret it askew when they're in not self. And when they're in not self, the random bundle has a likelihood of being able to influence you. So that's why they're attracted to you. So being very careful to recognize and self-realize what's right for you. Not to give weight to the thing that seems to be speaking through you because it's so much more intelligent than you, because it seems to be outside of you. No. There is no truth found outside of you. Truth is your lived experience inherent in this unique individuated experience expression of consciousness in form. The internal authoritative process, whether you have a personal process of authority, lunar, mental, or whether you have an individual, as an inner authority process, that is the thing to trust, not the random bundle aggregates that seem to be angels, demons, ghosts, gods, entities, or aliens. Okay? That's the most important lesson of the day from that particular course. So many of the crystals of consciousness are just one time, as in they only got one incarnation, and they get bundled into this random aggregate, as far as whether it be a few hundred or a few thousand or 10,000. They are rogue crystal bundles, and then they get locked out of the incarnative process because there's a dysfunction at death. That death not being natural, as in the vehicle got disturbed, brain surgery at the very end. What kind of disease did they have? Donating my body for science so that I can have, my donation go live on and they can study me. No, don't do that. As in, you don't want to disturb your remainder of the electricity that you need for your Bardo stage. Or, let's say, donating your body to being an organ donor. Well, that disturbs you enough, as in you cannot have an invasiveness come into your body for you to still have Bardo. Ra says that these random bundle aggregates, they have to get in your aura, as in touch your aura, have aura contact. When they get close enough to you, there are certain situations where the neutrino information going through them, you're going to experience a potential aspect of that personality crystal bundle. One of the many. You're not going to experience the aggregate as a whole. You'll experience whatever you resonate to on the fractal line of it. So your personality crystal that is not able to return to the bundles are going to aggregate like this. Okay? They get collected or picked up, attracted to those of like frequency. So some of them might wander off alone, and maybe, by wandering off alone in 10,000 years, they get to be the core of their own aggregate. So these random bundle aggregates. It's quite interesting that the fractal line is not only in life, but also in death. So we have our main personality crystal bundles. Think of them like the Godheads. You find your Godhead, your original source bundle, by looking at your sun, personality sun, and that is where you find your source to go back to if you go through your correct Bardo stage. So this is an ongoing multiplying process according to Ra. The aggregates grow in number because the main personality bundles are diminishing in number. The gods, as in what we archetypally think of as the big gods in the sky. Now we have all our little gods here on the planet. But if you don't go back to your main crystal bundle, then you don't reincarnate into form. As in, these personality crystals are out of the reincarnation game. So each one of us that are alive on this planet here now, all 8 billion of us, we came from one of the main personality crystal bundles out there. And if you don't die correctly, you end up here, according to Ra. You're taken out of the reincarnative game. A single rider, he would say. This enormous number of single riders that we have here. The only personality crystals that are guaranteed to move on are the ones that return to the main personality crystal bundle. As in, they won't die with the demolishment of the earth in 1300 years. The main personality crystal bundles, the ones in source, will move on, as in go on. And this is why this information, the reincarnative program, is so important. Why we've been going through this in painstaking detail, I would say, according to how Ra laid it out, is to help impress upon as many people as possible why it's so important to experience your Bardo, so that you can return to your main personality crystal bundle, because this is where you get the guarantee that you're going to live on. So never really dying, these essential, because it will bring with you some level of consciousness at the end of the program. At the peak of the end of the program, it's going to be very significant to have these main personality crystal bundles still be intact. Do we have a choice, though? You die in a car wreck. Your neck is separated from your body. Are you going to get your Bardo? No. So I wouldn't take it too seriously. There are some things such as fate, and you can't argue with that. The key in all of this is to bring your consciousness at your level best. Do your best to go back to the bundle if you can. You know, hundreds of thousands of years, we've been alive on this planet in different forms. But when it comes to the thousands of years in which we haven't died correctly because of our modern day lifestyles, all of the modern technologies that we have, the quality of the personality crystal that returns to the actual bundle is going to be very different than the quality of a personality crystal that is out of the reincarnation game. Example, these ones up here, some of them have never been incarnate, and that's okay. But what if some of them have been reincarnated many times? We know for a fact, according to Ra and this knowledge, that these down here have only been this one game where they never got back, and so they're never going to again incarnate, right? So they're out of the incarnation game. And so when we look at the form principle, according to our nature, as far as coming to grips with what it means to be human, we're building this. It took us 90,000 years to build this self-reflective consciousness game, as in the Ajna. 90,000 years to develop self-reflected consciousness through our physical bioforms. It's primitive, as in it took us a long time, because there's a vast limitation that we have in the dilemma of being alive. We're very fragile creatures. Life and survival can be a fragile thing. So there's two different dilemmas that arise out of this fragileness, is that you cannot build a bioform that will last long enough to get to the point of the full potential of the awareness of consciousness. And that's why the reincarnative business. There's a dilemma that this body has to be fed and protected and cared for and educated. It has to be taken to this full point, and that takes a long time. So the limitations of what it is to be in a body, by eating, sleeping, dealing with all these viruses and diseases and gravity, car wrecks, train wrecks, plane wrecks. There are many dilemmas to being alive that threaten our form, bioform. And that's a disadvantage to our personality, who's looking to develop its consciousness, the quality of its consciousness, which, in other words, is just about awareness. The awareness of you living this life, this body. So despite what it appears to be an illusion of separateness, we learn things through every incarnation, and every incarnation is useful, valuable to the totality. However, the program as a whole, as far as it seems like we learn through our lack of correct function, the program as a whole isn't impressed with our lack of correct functioning, according to Ra. The limits of consciousness, as in our self-reflected intelligence, is that in one of these vehicles, even if we look at our geniuses of whatever day and age you want to look at them, the celebrated heroes, modern day, love them or hate them, Elon Musk as an example, of the advancements in technology that he's, facilitating, generating. He's a manifesting generator. Obviously, we are all still deeply limited to this form and our finite sensory capacities, whatever our differentiated uniqueness happens to be. So the next form, as far as what Ra was told, is that it's going to be non-reproductive and a non-bioform. As a non-reproductive, non-bioform, it means that this is the end of the reincarnative process, as in that number of personality crystals. He calls them so-called, now that you know, because he didn't bring this to the beginning of the human design education because it would have confused people. We always talk about it in the beginning as, okay, the design crystal and the personality crystal, they're very different things. But this so-called personality crystal, which really is a design crystal and not truly a personality crystal, that is to be, that is to come, the full-blown totality. And, quote, the number of personality crystals, so-called, that will be essential for the future is the number of personality crystals required to endow the number of forms which will be limited, that will be created, and will not either grow or diminish. So, non-bioform, non-reproductive. We're going to eliminate a lot of personality crystals as far as the culling, the great culling that's coming. It won't be necessary. It eliminates a lot of the personality history. The only personality crystals that return to their bundles are going to be the ones that are guaranteed to move on. So just like we who are incarnate, we won the lottery. Well, you might not think that if you live to see the day of a cataclysm and survive this one. It's not survivable in 1300 years, according to Ra. But similarly, if we get back to our main personality bundles, in other words, get your Bardo and see the full differentiated spectrum of the unique quality of your consciousness, because Bardo is part of your life. It's just that it happens in death. Then you get back to your main personality bundle and you are going to move on in the game. The random bundle aggregates, as far as there are going to be certain bundles, crystals within these bundles, that will not incarnate again, but they will move on to the end. So they'll get picked up by the bundle core. Remember, a bundle core contains all of the magnetic monopoles. Remember at the very beginning we were talking about the core bundle getting freed? Okay, so we've got all those magnetic monopoles. And what do magnetic monopoles do? They pull, right? They're magnetic. So because the bundle core, the design bundle core, is going to contain all of the monopoles for every vehicle that was ever built, when you think about the magnetic monopole and the fetus, as in the fetus body, and that calls in the personality crystal, you know, we who got called. The monopole knows our number. We got called, you know, so it pulls us in. And then what's so interesting about that crystal bundle is that when it leaves at the end of the round, the process, because it carries within it every single vehicle of every kind that you can possibly imagine, the concretization of form in the history of the planet. It means that the number of every single personality crystal is available. So some of them may get picked up. So it's not a doom and gloom, absolutely. None of the random personality crystal bundles get to move on. Some of them will. Some of them will. So even if this is the last jaunt for you in these forms, if you end up as a rogue crystal bundle, when the planet explodes from getting hit by that cataclysm and it's the end of the round, you still may get picked up. But it's not something we can control. What's important, here is an example. Let's say the personality crystal returned to the bundle. She's jet set. She's set. She's on her plane. She's up in the air. But the personality crystal from a random bundle aggregate, well, she's still down in the terminal, waiting to get picked up, as an example. So this is the beginning of a rebalancing, according to Ra. As in, when somebody goes through their proper process, there's this wonderful thing. As in, you get the experience that somebody, you know, you or somebody close to you went through their experience, and now they're guarded and protected, you know, because they were guarded and protected by those of us who are still alive, given the opportunity to experience their Bardo. Then they get back to their original crystal bundle, and they'll be back for certain. That's your first class ticket. Okay, coming back for the end. And you will move on. So the dysfunction of not getting your Bardo, there's no guarantee. There's a guarantee over here. You got your first class ticket. There's no guarantee over here if you're part of the rogue crystal bundles. So there's people who have got their plane ticket, they're boarding, but you're just kind of standing around waiting. And you're lucky if you get to on the plane because, you know, somebody missed their flight and they're holding a space for you. Yippee! They're going to take you. But it's not a guarantee. Remember, this is why it's so important for us. The body should not be stored in the ground, and no medical intrusive work done to the body, as in do not disturb this form. Still using it. I'm still alive, as in personality still borrowing the body. But even though technically we call it dead, 72 hours, according to Ra. Give it 72 hours, as in the care of the body after death, to give it its process, its prepping time to be picked up by the main crystal bundle, the original source bundle from which you came. So dying correctly will take on a deeper and deeper importance to the lives of those of us who are experimenting with human design because, of course, you spend so much of your time focusing on right action or aligned interaction in life. It's only natural that as you get closer to the end of one's life that you consider or contemplate your death process. You know, the more aware that you are, ultimately, Ra says, the more insistent you're going to be to close your process correctly. He says it was obvious to him that it's an aspect of this knowledge that he gets to share in his lifetime that will have an extraordinary power long down the road. So do you want to have your first class ticket? Is it important enough to you to do everything within your power to find your way to shine beyond the stars at the end of the day? Because if it is important to you, there will be something that you do. If it isn't, I mean, no guarantees, but what if it really doesn't matter? It reminds me of what it is to be really witness to this experience. If you are absolutely crystal clear on allowing yourself, your body to run the show, and you watch your mind, you will notice over time as you decondition and align that your mind is worried about so many things that truly do not matter. You have this question and that question and what if this and what if that, but truly in the end it doesn't matter. Because you're in the right place at the right time, you're operating in alignment, and everything will work out just fine. But you only get to see that through the experience. So as an example, you're really worried about something. Somebody threatens you, and they get really upset at you, and they threaten you, and they make statements and whatever, and now you're worried. So you do some things to prevent whatever it is, these bad things that this person threatened you with that were going to happen. But it turns out in the end, it was just a bluff. It was just them being mean. And so you wasted time, energy, money, potentially down the drain because you were scared. You operated out of fear. This current era that we're in is incredibly tied to fear. It's the end of an age, and at this stage, it always moves backwards. As far as the rounds, the evolutionary rounds, line quality-wise, we are currently in an era of fear. The motivational frequency being fear, the first line quality being fear. So people are easily distorted and in truth operating from fear, as in, these places and spaces where it really isn't necessarily truth. It's just the background frequency. And we can all get caught up in it, Think about what happened when they closed down the countries, if you were one of them. It happened a week before the close of my house in 2020. And I remember my daughter and I being the first ones to wear those damn masks into the drugstore to go and buy some things, some supplies for what, life had in store. It's so easy for them to manipulate, to use propaganda in order to manipulate humanity because of the herd mentality, because of the groupings, particularly in cities, because we know that the closer that human beings are to each other, the larger the auric frequency grows. So unless you're really out away from people, if you're in any of those high rises, God help you. I'm sorry, but what to do? You're living in an aura box. If you work and sleep in an aura box, you are part of the construct of, humanity. One of the biggest riches that we have as humans is not just time, but also space. And in truth, you cannot separate those two from each other. So give yourself the time to decondition and align. It takes 7 years of dedication to your process of experimentation with awareness to develop the quality of your consciousness, to get to this place of awareness, to get to this space where you can trust yourself ultimately, to be exactly what life gave you, what you came here to be. No more, no less. No need to run around trying to figure it all out. You can't. You got an undefined head, or Ajna, or both. It's pointless. Just live your life. Be who you came here to be, and life will take care of itself. We can only be what we are. We cannot be what we are not. And so just to let go of any of the fear, if any of that bothered you, this choicelessness, helplessness, no choice, said the voice, and what to do. It is about being you. That's it. And if it's possible that any of you are inspired to find some legal recourse where, just like, they have those living wills where you ask not to be put on a machine. If you ever figure out a way to create some kind of form, I have yet to come across it. You would think that in the many years of this material being taught, I don't think it's gotten out to the public enough as far as the word getting out, which is one of the reasons why I've made excerpts and put them on YouTube in an attempt to make the call and get it to be more widely known that this is a possibility, a potentiality that you could die correctly to if it's right for you to do. Okay, your first class ticket. I'm going to read from Ra. Quote, he says, "To be the infrastructure for personality is something extraordinary. We cannot imagine what the personality of the totality is going to be. We can't. We can imagine what it is to be an aspect of one personality. We cannot. That's something else. But what we do grasp is how the mechanism works, because we are the mechanism, these wonderful personality crystals. Their job of experimenting with frequencies is what it is in the end. Just being able to set the right configurations for a personality to tap into. It's like in the fetus, before the personality arrives, how the infrastructure of the brain is being prepared, the neocortex. It's sort of like the personality crystal is your personal handbook, your guide to utilizing the potentials of self-reflected consciousness in the vehicle, something like that. But it is this return. You get your ticket, if you're lucky. No choice in that. Quote, "Leave this plane with the power of correctness and return to source. And in returning to source, you really fulfill the whole process. In essence, you fulfill a purpose that's far deeper than anything we can understand on this plane. And we are of ultimately greater value to the whole by returning to our source." And that was from Ray of Cosmology, Semester 3, Dying, Death, and Bardo Stages. Lesson 10, Buddha's Dream, or How the Wheel Stops Turning. So remember, protect your body, protect this vehicle. Let your body have its full 72 hours. Now, not everybody's going to need the full 72 hours, but you do need your 3 stages. It has to do with wherever the actual activation of your moment of death was. You could have a long Bardo sequence, or there could be shorter ones, but it is about protecting that vehicle for the full 72 hours, just in case. You want to have your Bardo process. Yeah, so there are tremendous advantages to knowing this material, not just for the dead in this example, but also for the living. So if it's right for you to hold space for people, to do this work in hospice, whether you're doing it personally or professionally, I really want to hear from you, whatever your experience happens to be, wherever you are at in your journey. I would love to hear what's right for you to share. and to remember that in this journey of discovery, self-discovery, there is no right, wrong, good, bad. It's just this and that. This is a completely amoral system. Take what resonates, leave the rest. Over time, you may find, as you decondition and align, that things shift for you. And it really is about the journey. It's about releasing expectations and just going along for the ride.